My name is Celestine Okafor Webb. I am 48 years old, and I lived, until that Tuesday, in the top floor unit of a 4-unit property in the Montrose area of Houston, Texas, that I purchased in 2009, with inheritance money from my grandmother, and money I had saved working double shifts as an OR nurse for 6 years. My grandmother's name was Ida. She had worked as a domestic in Houston for 40 years, and she saved every dollar she did not need, and she left $67,000 to be split between me and my 2 cousins, and I took my share, and I bought a building. My husband is Marcus Webb. We have been married for 11 years. He is a good man, in most of the ways that matter, which made certain other things harder to name, and harder to fix, and harder to feel righteous about when they needed addressing. His mother is Gloria Webb. She is 67, formidable, and has never once in 11 years used my first name without making it sound like a question. This is the story of a Tuesday in October, and what it cost her to find out the answer. If you are watching from Houston, Dallas, Atlanta, or anywhere in the South, where somebody's mother-in-law has tested your patience beyond what the Lord intended, drop your city in the comments. I need to know who is out here with me tonight. And if you have ever been told to leave a room that was yours, subscribe. Because what I am about to tell you is for every woman who has ever been underestimated by someone standing on her own floor. Before I tell you about the letter, before I tell you what my property manager said when I called her from the car, and what Gloria's face looked like 72 hours later, I need to take you back. Not to the Tuesday, not to the slippers and the lawn and the new lock. To the beginning, to my grandmother Ida, to the building, to the reason I never corrected anyone when they assumed it was Marcus's. My grandmother Ida came to Houston from Louisiana in 1961, with $40 and a suitcase and a stubbornness that I understand now better than I did when she was alive. She cleaned houses. She pressed and packed for families who did not know her last name. She saved. She tithed 10% and saved everything else, and in 1974 she bought a small house in 3rd Ward and rented the back unit to a schoolteacher, and that was how she learned that a building could work for you while you slept. She taught me this at 11 years old, sitting at her kitchen table in 3rd Ward while she showed me her ledger, a composition notebook with dates on the left and amounts on the right. Celestine, she said, $1 in a mattress is just $1. $1 in a deed grows while you sleep. I never forgot that. When Ida died in 2008, she left me $28,400. Not enough for a house in Houston. Enough for a down payment on a multi-family property if combined with the $38,000 I had saved from 6 years of OR nursing, double shifts, holiday weekends, the particular frugality of a woman who has memorized a dead grandmother's ledger. I bought the Westheimer property in March of 2009. 4 units, top floor for me, 3 below for tenants. The deed was in my name, Celestine Ida Okafor, my maiden name. Because I was not yet married to Marcus Webb, and I was not in the habit of putting what was mine under someone else's name. I want to tell you what it felt like to sign those closing documents. I was 34 years old. I had been to a closing once before as a paralegal running documents for a colleague. I knew what the stack of papers looked like, what the notary looked like, what the pen felt like. But signing your own name on your own deed is something different. There is a weight to it that is not in the pen. It is the weight of your grandmother's 40 years of saved dollars arriving at a specific, permanent place. I signed Celestine Ida Okafor, and I thought, Ida, look what we did. I married Marcus in 2013. I want to tell you about Marcus carefully, because he deserves that. Marcus Webb is a man of genuine goodness and exhausting avoidance. He loves me. He has loved me consistently and warmly for 11 years. He also has spent 11 years managing his mother like a weather system, routing around her, absorbing her, never quite confronting her. And that avoidance cost us both something I am still calculating. His mother Gloria moved to Houston from Beaumont in 2014. She needed a place. Marcus's sister had no room. His brother had complications. Marcus came to me and said, Celestine, the unit on the 2nd floor is empty. Just until she gets settled. I said, how long? He said, 6 months, maybe 8. That was 11 years ago. Gloria never paid rent. This was not an oversight. It was a decision Marcus made, quietly, without a direct conversation, that calcified into a permanent arrangement over the course of several conversations I was not present for. When I raised it in year 2, Marcus said his mother was family. When I raised it in year 4, he said she was on a fixed income. When I raised it in year 7, he said, Celestine, it is my mother, as if the building were his. He did not say it that way. He would never say it that way. Marcus is not careless. But the assumption was there in the sentence. The way water is in a wall before the damage shows. Present, structural, slowly doing what it does. Gloria did not know I owned the building. This was not a plan. Not at first. It was simply a thing that never got corrected, and the longer it went uncorrected, the more it became its own structure. In the early years of the marriage, when Marcus and I would host his family for cookouts on the back patio, Gloria would make a point of showing people the property the way a person shows something they are proud of. This is our home. This is what Marcus has. Look at what we built. I would stand next to my husband, and say nothing, and smile the way you smile, when the correction would cost more than you want to pay at that particular moment. His cousins assumed it was Marcus's. His aunts assumed it was Marcus's. Gloria assumed it most of all. The erosion was not dramatic. It never is with Gloria. She is too intelligent for drama. She prefers precision. She would mention, in conversation, that she had asked the plumber to come look at the kitchen faucet in her unit. Not asked me. Asked the plumber directly. As if she were the one responsible for the property. She would tell the tenant in Unit 3 that they needed to put their trash cans out earlier, as if she were the building manager. She would refer to the property as home, not her unit, but home, in the proprietorial way of a woman who has decided that possession is 9/10 of location. I found this irritating. I found it quietly, consistently irritating in the way that water finding a low place is irritating. Nothing dramatic. Just the persistent fact of something going where you haven't authorized it to go. In year 8 of our marriage, Marcus and I had the kind of quiet, long-running argument that couples have when one person has been absorbing something for years, and the other person has been pretending not to notice. I said, your mother needs to pay rent, Marcus. What she's living in is worth $1,400 a month in this market. He said, Celestine, you know she can't afford, I said. Or she needs to know it's mine. He was quiet. He said, why does that matter? I thought about that question for a long time afterward. Why does it matter? It matters because a person who does not know you own the floor she is standing on will not treat you with the respect of a landlord. It matters because authority without acknowledgement is just labor. It matters because Ida saved 40 years for that $28,400, and she deserves to have her name on something that is treated like it means something. It matters because my grandmother did not clean 40 years of other people's houses, so that her granddaughter's name could disappear from the deed she bought with that money. I said, it matters, Marcus. He said, let's not make this complicated. And so it stayed uncomplicated, and so Gloria stayed uninformed, and so the years passed and the assumption grew like something rooted, until the Tuesday in October, when it produced its fruit. The argument that led to the Tuesday had been building for 3 weeks. Marcus and I had been navigating a rough patch, the particular rough patch of a long marriage encountering the accumulated weight of too many deferred conversations. I am not going to detail the specifics, because they are ours, and because they are also beside the point. What matters is that at some point during those 3 weeks, I went to stay at my friend Denise's house for a few days. And in my absence, Gloria decided that my absence was a conclusion. I came back on a Tuesday morning. My key did not work. I tried it twice. I checked the address the way you do when something impossible is happening, as if the street might have changed overnight. Then I knocked. Gloria opened the door. She was in her house slippers. She had her arms crossed. She had the expression of a woman who has been preparing for this moment and is pleased with how it is going. She said, Marcus needs some time. You need to let him breathe. I think it's best if you find somewhere else to be for a while. I said, Gloria, where is my husband? She said, he's resting. He doesn't need to be disturbed. I said, I need you to open this door. She said, I had the locks changed this morning. A pause. Deliberate. This is my house, Celestine. And right now, you are not welcome in it. There it was. My house. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because it was not what you might expect. I did not feel rage, not right then. I felt something older and quieter and more specific than rage. I felt the particular grief of watching someone speak a sentence they believe completely. A sentence that has been true in their mind for so long it has grown solid, and knowing that in approximately 72 hours it was going to dissolve. I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about Ida, about the ledger, about the closing in March of 2009, and the pen in my hand, and the name I had written, Celestine Ida Okafor, in the signature block of the deed. I said. All right, Gloria, I said it quietly. Calmly, in the voice of a woman who knows something the room does not yet know. I picked up my bags from the porch, where she had arranged them. I went to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for about 30 seconds. Then, I called Sandra. Sandra is my property manager. She has managed the Westheimer building for 8 years. She is efficient and practical, and when I told her what had happened, she was quiet for 3 seconds in a way that told me she was already reaching for the file. I said, Sandra, I need you to pull the deed on the Westheimer building and prepare a formal notice of non-tenancy termination for Unit 2. The occupant is Gloria Webb. She has no lease. She has no rental agreement. She has been in that unit at the owner's discretion for 11 years. I need the notice drafted today. Sandra said, Celestine, are you sure? I said, I am sure. She said, I'll have it ready by 5. I drove to Denise's house. I drank a cup of tea. And I waited. Let me tell you what Sandra found when she pulled the deed. The Westheimer property was purchased in March of 2009 by Celestine Ida Okafor. Not Celestine Webb. Not Celestine Okafor Webb. My full maiden name. The name I had written on every document at that closing because the building was mine, and I had known who I was when I bought it. I never transferred the deed after the marriage. I want to be honest about this. It was not strategic, not at first. I simply did not do it, because the building was mine, because I had bought it with Ida's money and my money, and because some part of me, the part that remembered the ledger at the kitchen table in 3rd Ward, knew that a deed in your own name has a weight that is not sentimental. The current market value of the Westheimer property, per the Harris County Appraisal District assessment from the previous spring, was $1.1 million. The unit Gloria Webb occupied had a comparable rental value of $450 per month. Over 11 years, 132 months, at $4,450 per month, Gloria Webb had lived in my building without paying $191,400 in rent. I had not done that math before. I did it that afternoon, sitting in Denise's kitchen with a notepad and a cup of tea that had gone cold. I sat with the number for a while. Not out of anger. More the way you sit with any large true thing that has been true for a long time, without you looking at it directly. Sandra emailed the formal notice at 5:08 p.m. It was a notice of occupancy termination, addressed to Gloria Louise Webb, Unit 2, the Westheimer property, signed by Celestine Ida Okafor, owner. It gave 30 days notice per Texas property law. It noted that no lease agreement existed. It cited the property ownership documentation. It was 4 paragraphs, clean and professional, and it used my maiden name on the signature line. That meant, the first time Gloria Webb read the name of the person who owned the building she had been standing in for 11 years, she would read it on an eviction notice. Marcus called at 7 p.m. He said, Celestine, what is happening? I said, your mother changed the locks on my building. Marcus, a silence. He said, she didn't. I said, she told me it was her house. Those were the words she used. Her house. It seemed her house. While my bags were on the lawn. In the rain. Another silence. Longer, he said, Celestine, I did not know she was going to do that. I believed him. That is one of the difficult truths of the 11 years. Marcus was not conspiring. Marcus was avoiding, which is different and in some ways more exhausting, because at least a conspiracy has a plan. Avoidance just has a bill that accumulates. I said, Marcus, I need you to understand what has happened. Your mother changed the lock on a building I own. She told me it was her house. She put my bags on the lawn. And now she has received a notice from my property manager informing her that her occupancy is being terminated in 30 days. He said, Celestine, I said, I am not asking for your permission. I am telling you what is happening, so that you can have a conversation with your mother. Before she reads that notice, and has no context for it. He said, you own the building? I said, Marcus, we have been married for 11 years. What did you think? He said, I always assumed it transferred when I said, it didn't. The silence after that was the longest one. I want to tell you something about that silence, because it is important. Marcus is not a bad man. What he had assumed, what he had let settle into the background of the marriage without examining, was the assumption that 2 people sharing a life means 2 people sharing a ledger. He had absorbed my building into his identity the way we absorb the things we live with, not deliberately, not maliciously, just completely. And he had done what avoidant people do when a comfortable assumption meets a true correction. he went quiet. I let him be quiet. I needed him to find his way through it on his own before the Thursday. Gloria received the notice on Wednesday morning. Sandra told me she signed for it herself. I know what Wednesday must have looked like in Unit 2 of the Westheimer property. I know because I know Gloria Webb, and I know what it looks like when a woman who has organized her identity around the authority of a room is informed, in legal language, in 4 clean paragraphs, that the room is not hers. She called Marcus. Marcus called me. I did not answer. She called Marcus again. He called me again. I let it go to voicemail. Not from cruelty, from necessity. I needed the 72 hours to be what they were. Not an argument, not a negotiation, not an opportunity for Gloria to perform distress, until someone managed her back into comfort. I needed them to be information. I needed her to sit with the name on that notice and understand, fully and without interruption, who she had told to leave. On Thursday morning, Marcus came to Denise's house. He stood at the door, and he looked like a man who had spent 36 hours learning something he should have known a long time ago. He said, "Can I come in?" I said yes. We sat at Denise's kitchen table, and Marcus said, "My mother wants to talk to you." I said, "I know." He said, "She didn't know, Celestine. She genuinely believed." I said, "I know that too, Marcus. I know she believed it. That is the whole problem." He said, "She feels terrible." I said, "Marcus, I need you to understand what I felt standing in the drizzle on a Tuesday morning, with my bags on the lawn of my own building, while your mother told me it was her house. I need you to sit with that before we talk about what your mother feels." He was quiet. Good quiet. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Celestine. I should have told her years ago." I said, "Yes, you should have. And I should have insisted that you did. We both let this go too long." We went to the building on Thursday afternoon. Gloria was in her unit. She had clearly spent the 2 days in the particular discomfort of a woman who has always known where the power in a room was, and has just discovered she was wrong about its location. She opened the door when we knocked. She looked at me. Not the way she looked at me on Tuesday. Not the arms-crossed certainty of a woman holding a door she believed was hers. Something smaller and less managed and more true. She said, "Celestine." She said my name without the question mark. For the first time in 11 years, she said it like a complete sentence. I said, "Gloria, I need to tell you some things." We sat in her kitchen, the kitchen of the unit I owned, in the building my grandmother's savings helped build, and I told her about Ida. About the ledger. About the $28,400, and the 6 years of doubler shifts and the closing in March of 2009. I told her about the deed in my maiden name. I told her the market value. I told her, quietly and without theater, the rental equivalent of 11 years. I did not tell her these things to wound her. I told her because a woman who doesn't know whose building she is standing in cannot make a real decision about how to stand in it. And I had let that ignorance persist, partly out of conflict avoidance, and partly out of the particular pride of a woman who does not need to announce what she owns, and it had cost all 3 of us. Gloria was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because your son asked me not to make it complicated. And because I thought it didn't matter as much as it did." She said, "It mattered." Gloria looked at the table for a long moment. Then she looked at me. And she said, in a voice that sounded like something landing after a long time in the air, "What do you need from me, Celestine?" That was the first real conversation we ever had. I want to tell you how it resolved, because you deserve to know. Gloria and Marcus and I reached an agreement. She pays rent, not $1,450. Not the full market rate, but a fair amount we agreed on together. Something she can manage on her fixed income, and that acknowledges what the unit is worth, and who it belongs to. It is documented. It is signed. My property manager has a copy. Marcus and I are still married. Still navigating. Still having the deferred conversations we should have been having for years, which is uncomfortable and necessary, and something I have more hope about now than I did before the Tuesday. Ida's building is still standing on Westheimer. The tenants in Units 1 and 3 both renewed their leases this year. The top floor has new curtains that I picked myself. I want to say something about what this story is really about. It is not about property. It is not about winning. It is about the particular danger of letting things go unnamed. When I did not correct the assumption about who owned the building, I was trying to keep the peace. I thought the correction would cause more trouble than the silence. But silence about what is yours does not preserve the peace. It just defers the cost. And what I have learned, at 48, is that the cost of a deferred truth is always higher than the cost of a stated one. My grandmother Ida cleaned houses for 40 years. She pressed other people's clothes and maintained the temperature of rooms that did not belong to her. And she saved, and she bought a house, and she kept a ledger, and she sat at a kitchen table and showed her granddaughter what it means to make a dollar in a deed that grows while you sleep. I did not let Ida's name go on a building that treated itself like someone else's. Not anymore. Have you ever owned something, a room, a title, a truth about yourself, that the people around you had decided belonged to someone else? Have you ever stayed quiet about what was yours because you were trying to keep a peace that was already costing you? Tell me in the comments. Tell me your city. Tell me what you put your name on.